This weapon has no electronics, no guidance system, no battery that can die at the wrong moment. It is a metal tube that drops around in one end and lets gravity do the rest. It weighs 37 pounds. A crew of 3 operates it. It was designed in the 1930s, copied from a French engineer's blueprint purchased by the American military for 8 weapons, at a time when the world was still building toward the next war. Since then, the United States military has fought in the Pacific, in Korea, in Vietnam, in the Persian Gulf, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and in conflicts on nearly every continent in between. In every single one of those wars, a soldier was carrying this tube into contact. In every single one, it proved itself indispensable in ways that the people writing the doctrine never fully anticipated. Right now, in 2026, Ukraine has expanded domestic production of mortar ammunition, including 60mm rounds, because battlefield demand has remained extremely high throughout the war. The armies fighting in eastern Ukraine, in trenches that look more like 1917 than anything a modern military planned for, keep reaching for a weapon whose fundamental design has not changed in 85 years. And when you understand what happened on a ridge on Okinawa, in the dark, on the night one American sergeant ran out of grenades and improvised something that earned him the Medal of Honor, you will understand why no technology developed since has managed to replace a metal tube and a round that arcs up before it comes down. To understand why the 60mm mortar has survived everything the military has thrown at it, and why that problem has never gone away. In a rifle company, a commander has a specific and brutal dilemma. The enemy is 200 yards away, behind a wall, on the other side of a hill, or dug into a trench that the terrain puts completely out of reach of direct fire. A rifle bullet travels in a straight line. So does a machine gun round. So does a rocket. None of them can reach a target that isn't in the line of sight. And in every war human beings have ever fought, the enemy has done everything possible to get out of the line of sight. Artillery can reach those targets. But artillery lives at the battalion level or higher. It requires a call for fire, a fire mission request up the chain, a response back down, and then adjustment rounds before anything useful lands. In a fluid engagement at close range, that process takes time a rifle company doesn't have. Helicopters in close air support have the same problem. They have to be requested, cleared, routed to the fight, and they cannot loiter indefinitely over a single platoon. What the rifle company needs is organic, indirect fire, something it owns, carries, and controls at the company level, deployable in seconds, that can arc around up over a wall, over a ridgeline, into a trench, or behind a building, and land it on a target that no direct fire weapon can touch. The 60mm mortar is that weapon. It always has been. The American military recognized this problem in the 1920s, spent nearly a decade evaluating designs, and in 1938 purchased 8 examples of a French system built by the engineer Edgar Brandt. When American ordnance engineers revised the production drawings for American manufacturing standards, the weapon was redesignated the Mortar 60mm M2. The first production contract went out in January 1940. By the time America entered the war, it was going to every rifle company in the Army and Marine Corps. The founding logic was simple. Close the gap between a grenade, which a man can throw 30 yards, and an artillery battery that might be 3 miles behind the line. Put something in the hands of the company commander that he doesn't have to ask permission to fire. That logic has not changed in 85 years. Every war since has confirmed it. Every generation of military technology has promised to make it obsolete. April 13, 1945. Kakazu Ridge, Okinawa. Pre-dawn darkness. Technical Sergeant Beauford Theodore Anderson, 381st Infantry Regiment, 96th Infantry Division, was a mortarman. 22 years old, 5'7", 130 pounds, a Wisconsin farm boy who had already fought through the Philippines and earned a Bronze Star on Leyte. Now he was on the most fortified island the American military had yet assaulted, 340 miles from the Japanese home islands, in the middle of what would become the bloodiest campaign in the Pacific War. At 3 in the morning, 75 Japanese soldiers struck his unit's flank in a coordinated pre-dawn counterattack. Grenades, knee mortars, satchel charges, coming out of the dark at close range. Anderson ordered his men into one of the stone Okinawan burial tombs that dotted the landscape. All of them were wounded. He told them to stay. Then he went back out, alone. He emptied his M1 carbine into the charging column at point-blank range. He reached for grenades. He was out of grenades. A Japanese mortar dud landed near him. He picked it up and threw it back. It detonated in the middle of the attacking column and killed several men. That gave him an idea. In the dark, bleeding from a shrapnel wound, he found his squad's ammunition crate. He opened a box of 60mm mortar rounds, the same rounds that went into the tube he carried, and he began pulling the safety pins. The fuse on a 60mm round of that era required an arming force, a specific impulse to activate the detonator. Anderson found a rock. He banged the base of each round against the rock to simulate the impulse of a tube launch. Then, he threw them. He threw 14 mortar rounds like grenades into a column of attacking Japanese soldiers. Between throws, he reloaded his carbine and fired. He alternated, throw a round, empty a magazine, throw a round, until the counterattack broke and the surviving Japanese withdrew back down the ridge. When it was over, 25 Japanese soldiers were dead. Several machine guns and knee mortars were destroyed. His flank was intact. Bleeding badly, refusing evacuation over his men's protests, Anderson walked back to find his company commander to report what had happened. President Harry Truman presented him the Medal of Honor on Memorial Day, 1946. The citation reads in part, "He secured a box of mortar shells, extracted the safety pins, banged the bases upon a rock to arm them, and proceeded alternately to hurl shells and fire his carbine among the enemy, finally forcing them to withdraw." Two of the most famous cases in American military history of a soldier throwing armed 60mm mortar rounds as field-expedient grenades both ended in Medal of Honor citations. The detail that matters here is not the improvisation. It is what the improvisation tells you about the weapon itself. Anderson didn't reach for a rifle scope or a radio or a piece of technology that required training to use under fire. He reached for the thing he carried every day, the thing he knew better than anything else in his kit, the most reliable piece of equipment in his possession. The 60mm mortar round was so simple, so robust, and so well understood that a wounded sergeant could weaponize it in a new way in the middle of a night attack and win. After World War II, the American military spent decades convinced that technology was about to solve the indirect fire problem at the company level. That something smarter, faster, and more precise was on its way that would make a metal tube obsolete. It never came. The first candidate was the helicopter. By Vietnam, the Army had invested heavily in air mobility doctrine. If a rifle company in contact needed fire support, the argument went, helicopters could provide it faster and with more precision than any mortar crew. Gunships were real, and they were effective when the weather was clear, when the terrain permitted, when air assets were available, and when the request moved through the system fast enough to matter. In the mountains and jungles of Southeast Asia, none of those conditions were guaranteed. The 60mm mortar kept going. Then came the era of precision strike. During the 1980s and through the Gulf War, the military's answer to every indirect fire problem was increasingly centralized. Precision-guided munitions, GPS-targeted artillery, and eventually joint terminal attack controllers, who could put a 500-pound bomb on a target with extraordinary accuracy. The doctrine that emerged argued that the platoon or company no longer needed its own tube, because precision fires from higher echelons could be delivered on demand. Afghanistan disproved this in detail. In the mountains of Kunar province, in places like the Korangal Valley, American forces fought in terrain that broke nearly every assumption precision strike doctrine was built on. The ridges ran vertically. The enemy occupied the high ground, moved through tree cover, and fired from positions on the reverse slopes of the same ridges American soldiers were climbing. A reverse slope is the backside of a hill, invisible from below, unreachable by any direct fire weapon, and difficult to strike with fast-moving aircraft that need time and space to orient on a target. The 60mm mortar was frequently the only weapon that could reach an enemy on a reverse slope in under 30 seconds. Its round arcs up, high enough in some configurations to briefly reach several hundred feet before gravity pulls it down at a steep angle. That plunging trajectory is not a limitation. It is the entire point. It is what lets a round fall into a trench, behind a ridgeline, or into a courtyard that no rifle, no machine gun, and no rocket can touch. The M224's handheld mode, stripping the bipod and baseplate, firing with just the tube held in two hands and an auxiliary baseplate braced against the ground, was widely used in Afghan mountain engagements, where carrying a full setup was not possible, and speed mattered more than range. One soldier, one tube. Organic fire support that didn't require a radio call, a clearance request, or an aircraft overhead. After-action reporting from Afghanistan consistently described the 60mm mortar as indispensable to light infantry operations. Not because it was high technology, because it was there. It was light enough to carry to the fight, and it could reach targets that nothing else at the company level could reach. In 2022, when Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the war that followed looked nothing like the precision strike model Western doctrine had been built around since the Gulf War. It looks like trenches. It looks like fortified lines, dug positions, reverse slope defenses, and infantry engagements at ranges of a few hundred meters, in terrain that makes aerial observation difficult and line-of-sight weapons tactically ineffective. It looks, in stretches, like the First World War. In that environment, the mortar is not a legacy system. Artillery support is not guaranteed. Air assets are not always overhead. The infantry needs a way to put a round behind a berm or into a trench line right now, with what it is carrying. Ukraine expanded domestic production of mortar ammunition, including 60mm rounds, specifically because the weapon kept proving essential to infantry units fighting along a front that ran for hundreds of miles. A weapon the Western procurement world had been treating as mature, settled technology was being manufactured in wartime at scale because armies in the field kept needing it. The M224A1, the current American version, fielded beginning in 2011, weighs 37.5 pounds in its complete system configuration and under 20 pounds in its stripped-down handheld configuration. Its barrel is made from Inconel, a nickel-based alloy that gives it greater durability and longer service life than the steel tube it replaced. It fires the complete family of 60mm ammunition, high explosive, smoke, illumination, infrared illumination for night operations, and a new, enhanced lethality round whose fragmentation pattern approaches the effects of an 81mm shell. The Army and Marine Corps are still issuing it. It is still fielded at the rifle company level, 2 per Army Rifle Company and 3 per Marine Rifle Company. It is still the first organic, indirect fire weapon a company commander reaches for when the fight is too close, too fast, or too complex for the chain to respond. There is a category of weapons that military establishments keep trying to evolve past. They're too simple, too low technology, too dependent on human skill rather than system integration. Every generation of doctrine writers produces a new argument for why the modern battlefield no longer needs them. And then a war starts that looks different from the one on the planning charts, and the infantry finds itself in the terrain again. And the only thing that reaches the target in time is the thing one soldier can carry. The 60mm mortar has been in continuous American service for over 80 years. Every major conflict America has fought since the Second World War has put soldiers in terrain where this tube was the only weapon that could reach the target in time. Now, its ammunition is being manufactured in Ukraine because the most significant land war in Europe since 1945 keeps putting infantry in the same position. A sergeant named Beauford Anderson understood the weapon well enough in April 1945 that he improvised a new use for it, in the dark, alone, against 75 men. And he won. The United States gave him the Medal of Honor for it. He was too modest in the years that followed to ever mention it. The engineers who designed the original 60mm mortar asked a simple question: how do you give a rifle company the ability to fire at something it cannot see? They answered it with a metal tube, a bipod, and a base plate that one crew can carry on their backs. 85 years later, factories are still running. Soldiers are still carrying it up mountains. And the question it was built to answer, how does the company get fire on a target the line of sight can't reach, is still the most important tactical problem in infantry combat. Nobody has found a better answer. Nobody has stopped asking. If this is the kind of depth you're after, the engineering, the battlefield, the reason things outlast everything meant to replace them, subscribe. There's more coming.